So we're here to talk through this Cave and Kurotto twin set of puzzles, which were started by Ashish Kumar and then had some editing help from me, and so we ended up deciding to share the authorship credit, given it maintained a lot of Ashish's seeds, but then had also significant numbers of changes as we were getting it ready for publication. We'll start on the cave side, and this is a fairly straightforward cave, in part because it has two clues which each have the same kind of logical step near them. This 8 can see as many as 5 cells in this column because of the clues that surround it, so it has to take at least 3 in the row. This 9 can see as many as 5 cells in the column because of the clues around it, so it needs to take at least 4 in this row. And that gets us to where we have the start of the outside of the cave right here. There's a rule that should be pretty familiar to those who do cave a lot of the time, which is a no checkerboard rule, but once we have a pattern like this, the fact that these are 2 cells inside the cave, we can't have not cave cells on both sides, because by the time these both reach the edge of the grid, they've stranded part of the group. And so the lines I'm drawing now should be straightforward for those who solve this kind of puzzle enough. This 3 already has 2 cells, so it can't come all the way to here, can't come all the way to there. I guess we'll come to this place first. 2 in the corner always has, as a cell, it must use this cell, and let's sort of show you why. It's going to immediately go in one direction, but then that's the end of how far it can go, and it has to turn. So in one situation it would look like this, in the other situation it would look like this, but in both situations it takes this cell. We've now marked off all the parts of the 3, so we can see that this is necessary shape. We can now take the fact we have most of the 8 drawn in, come down like this. This cave cell has to get all the way out, so we can quickly shape these pieces. This 5 has to extend all the way to here. We'll mark these bits. This 6 can take as many as these 4. 5, 6 has to come over. It also has to come then up at least 2, and so the 7 will have to come up at least 3, but those complete both of these clues. The 5 comes over 1, finishes the 3, and these cells have to escape. We'll finish, I guess, the bottom first. The 6 has just 6 cells left that it can take. This has taken 6, so can't take from up here. These cells have to get to the exterior of the grid, and putting that in finishes the bottom. On the top, we've taken 4 cells plus 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That is forced. We have a case where this 5 on the top edge has to come down at least 1. It can only take 4 in this row. Once it comes down at least 1, it's going to actually strand this cell, which can't be outside the cave because every cell around it is part of the cave. So it takes all of these, actually. The 7's now taken 6 cells, so can't take this one, which means the 4 finishes here, which now has finished that clue. This 6 has to take 1 more. That comes down like so. This clue is done. Clue goes there. So that is the look of the cave side of this puzzle. It was slightly easier to constrain, but the large exterior clues are what drive its solve, and those same large exterior clues are some of the main seeds in this Kurotto, and that's because they sit, in the Kurotto case, diagonal to smaller numbers, and what this means functionally is that we know we have to shade these cells that are kitty corner or opposite to where these sit, so there can be as many as 4 shaded cells that come out of these directions, and there has to be at least 5 out of this direction, and similarly at least 5 out of this direction. So those are sort of symmetric elements, or at least on the opposite side of the grid, but common elements, I should say, that are related in these puzzles. This 1 from the 8 has to come at least to the right 1, which means this cell won't be used. That means this cell is used, and here we get to an interesting place where, because this touches a 6, this has to be at least 2 or 3, but what we see is by the time we shade the second cell, we touch this corner piece and have completed that actual group. With this being a 2, the 3 gets completed with 1 more, This now is exactly 6, and if it's exactly 6, it has to dodge this. And with this 6 touching up here, it can't use this cell either. And so a result of that is we're going to have a group that's 5 large coming out of this place on the bottom of that clue, and it's going to dodge around this smaller clue. And this is a trait that's common to a lot of Kurotto puzzles, is a space of where large and small working together will cause dodges to be necessary. We looked at this 9-4 on the edge. It actually turns out there's this other situation on the edge which is also important. It's going to start with a group that's 2 or more sitting here. And we'll even come one step further down this edge. This 7 is large compared to this 3, and what it in particular means, you may have a small group coming out of this space, like 1 or 2 large. You need to have a larger group coming out of the left cell here, and it can never take this cell. If it takes this cell, then all of these 7 shaded cells are touching all of those 3 shaded cells. So we have 0, 1, or 2 at the top, I guess, as we get started. And that means there are 5, 6, or 7 coming out this way. Now that we've marked 6, this is 5 or 6, and this is 1 or 2. This is 1 or 2, then the 3 has to take at least this cell. It takes this cell, you mark this off. This is exactly 2 up here. That means that on this other side of the 9, we have to take some more clues. In fact, we have to take exactly 2 more clues, so we take a total of 4 on these cells, and we have 5 left over. We'll mark that in. There is a little more to do on the bottom. Right now, I guess one thing to observe since we've marked this corner is that there's one shaded cell that's going to be on the left of or the bottom of the 7, and that means there are a total of 6 shaded cells that touch the top or right of this. There's a form of this clue where, or the shaded group, where this cell isn't shaded, instead it comes up at least to touch this one. That would then have 5 touching the cell. But having 5 touching this cell and then 6 more touching this is impossible. So to get the right count of 6 around this 6 has to, this cell must be shaded. That now actually means that this only has 1 shaded group around it. This must be exactly 6. So this is just 1 here. This is going to be a total of 3. And that cell, whichever of these is shaded, is going to make that unshaded. This group of 6 can't reach all the way to here. It can't reach all the way to there. So we'll just mark those off for convenience. And I think this is a good rest state of the puzzle. Let's come back to the top for a little bit. And we'll start by observing that there are 5 reachable cells from this clue. And all of them can be left unshaded, but I think this one, so maybe we can start by shading this. And the next thing is look in this upper right corner and think about dealing with this clue. It can take as many as 4 cells over here to the left, so it's got to take at least 1 here. And the question for you is, does it connect to this group? And there is a way to shade it using these 2 shaded cells and not using those, which would let that happen, but it can extend further to the left. And so but what you can show by saying that one pattern is impossible is that a pattern like this, or a pattern like this, or a pattern like this possible, but the 5 has to connect to these 5 cells. That marks this as unshaded. And so there are only 4 cells left around this clue. That now says that this cell is not the one that's shaded, because if it were 5 plus 3, it's too large for this. So we put this in. This now has 3, and it's going to have another 3 coming down like this. 2 plus 3 would leave space for 2 more. That's not going to work, but 5 plus 2 is fine, so this isn't used. This is used. We finished these clues all up. This 3 coming down won't use that cell. It's going to be one of these 2 shaded to finish it. The last thing we need to think about, and this is one of the harder kinds of deductions in a Kurotto, but is really interesting deduction when you see it, is cells that are near a clue, not directly touching a clue, that must be shaded. And the specific clue we're going to look at is here. either this cell or that cell are shaded to have some cells shaded around the 3. If this cell is shaded, it would be a single group of 1. This cell shaded can't come down here, so let's sort of mark this in. All of these have to extend out, and because this can extend this way, they're essentially like 1, 2, this is the 3rd necessary cell. And we could even go further out, but that this cell is part of this group and is shaded as key. That actually also tells us that it's going to be part of a full group of at least 3. Sorry, exactly 3 cells, because they can't have 2 distinct groups. They'll be joined by this. That now leaves that this 6 has only these 3 cells remaining that can be used by it. It can't take here and it can't take here, because those will connect to smaller groups. And so that set of constraints by placing in this pin cell, finish the 6, it finishes this 3. It now actually forces this and this for this 3. Forces this single cell down below, which forces this cell for the last of the 6, which forces this as the last cell for this 3. And so we've gotten through both of these puzzles. I think the Kurotto is the harder of the 2. It builds off some of the same useful seeds from the cave in terms of these large numbers on the sides, but in particular uses large near small to get some of these seeds happening. And then with the given fairly large and open middle, has some pretty tight constraints about how you have these groups near other groups that have to fully dodge each other, fully dodge. That gets us to the final answer. So hope you enjoyed parts of this week. Obviously the twin puzzles are harder to construct and therefore don't have as much of the same logical elegance as you sometimes would expect if you're making just a single puzzle with a single kind of theme, but I think this revised version of the Cave and Kurotto had a good mixture of logical steps for both the styles, and each of the puzzles stand on their own. So with that as guidance to how to get through these puzzles, we'll see you again soon.